Cressman podcast.
With me on the podcast today, Jade Eagleson. Now, this guy has had 130 global streams on his debut album, which makes it the most streamed country album in Canada in history. He's had a number one single, 2 gold singles, going to be 3 here pretty soon by the looks of things. Win at the CCMAs for Rising Star, and in 2021, his first ever Juno nomination. Plus, he's got a relatively brand new baby boy, Levi, and married the love of his life. And that has all happened in the last 3 years. So how overwhelming has that been for you, man?
It's been pretty crazy. It's been a really rapid growth, but it's kind of like, it's crazy because like some people say you blank and you miss it, and honestly, that's what this past few years have felt like. It's like a quick blank, and then all of a sudden I have everything I want in my life kind of right in front of me. I have my dream job, I have my dream girl, I have the most beautiful baby boy anyone could ever ask for. So everything is pretty amazing, and it happened very, very quickly.
It's got to feel pretty good, that you've sort of got a bunch of things in your life that you really wanted, boxes that you wanted to check, and you've got that all kind of done here in your 20s already.
Yeah, it's there's definitely some benefit to actually like getting it done earlier. I'm gonna be like 50 and be able to kind of be like, all right, like you can move out of the house now. Your mom and I can take things easy and retire or something. But it's like when I was younger, I always dreamt of having kids at a younger age and starting a family. And then the older I got, I was like, this is impossible. But then all of a sudden, like everything really happened pretty quickly. I mean, it was quick. It was really quick that everything did happen. Like I was like living in a trailer and everything. When I met Marina, I didn't have a great living situation and stuff. And then like now we have a nice little house we have and a family. So it's pretty crazy how rapidly things like change. You just really have to manifest it.
Yeah, and I think that's an important discussion point for people too, because you're investing so much money, so much time, so much effort into building out a career that hopefully you can monetize and enjoy going forward. But when you throw a baby in the middle of that mix, it really feels like, I'm sure at times, it's thrown a monkey wrench in things. Now, obviously, it's a blessing, and it's the best legacy that any of us can ever leave on this planet. And I fully believe that people who want to have kids absolutely should have kids, but there's no doubt that it is an overwhelming factor to add into the mix early on while you're getting things rolling.
It absolutely is.
Were you panicked a little bit?
Absolutely. We both were. We were young. We weren't even married yet when we found out. And that was kind of like my dream, is like, like get married, have a kid, not vice versa. But, it was definitely a shock. But like after the initial shock, I was like, I didn't believe it. We had the test. I'm like, nah, like there's no way. And then sure enough, like we went to the doctor and he's like, yeah, someone's swimming in there. So it was, is really like a shock to the system, because you're like, all right, like there's maybe some kinks as an adult you have to work out, because you're like, I'm still mature and immature in this way and that way, and I can't be that anymore. I have to be full time, responsible, and kind of take it. Honestly, preparing for that has helped me a lot in my career, being a father, because like it's you kind of
forces you to grow up.
Yeah, like having a child, like you're responsible for how your child turns out. For a great, I'd say maybe 85% of that is how you raise your child. And obviously you're a human, you're gonna do something different, do things different than your parents might have done them. But I just want to make sure that I'm giving him the best upbringing that I possibly can, both like mentally and otherwise.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for the growth trajectory it forces you in when you have to be a role model for someone that you care deeply about. Once you sort of take on that responsibility and understand that you're accountable for how he is going to end up seeing the world in many respects, it sort of puts you in a position where it forces you to put a lot of your bad habits aside. And did you have that happen to a degree?
Oh, absolutely. Going out on the road, you took things more serious. It's kind of like, all right, like it's more of a job because like musicians, a lot of musicians will go out and it's a big party and it's a ton of fun. And that was me. I didn't really take things too seriously. I did take them seriously and work my tail off to get to a certain point. But as soon as you have a kid, it's like some different type of reality sets in where you're like, all right, if I want longevity in this, things need to change and they need to change rapidly. So I made a lot of like personal decisions just to make sure that I could stay on track with my career and keep the trajectory going upward as opposed to kind of staying at a stalemate and not moving anywhere. So because if I can't grow, then my family can't grow.
Right. And how much of your motivation now has changed too? I would imagine now that, you've taken on this role as a father and a husband, um, when you start early on, it's about chasing fame to a degree and of course remaining true to yourself and authentic as far as the music is
Yeah.
concerned. But now it's, added to that, you have this motivation of wanting to deliver for your family.
Oh, absolutely. So it's like there's more motivation, sorry, to get those objectives done. Like you as a dad, you have to wake up early in the morning anyway. Like you're gonna be up.
There's no
Uh,
sleeping
yeah,
in.
those days are long gone. But um, you know, I wake up and I'm kind of like, all right, like I'm up early. My wife, I have a wonderful wife, so she takes care of them. Does whatever I need her to do in order for me to kind of get some work done. Like she's hands on and she's amazing. So that's allowed me to go down and start writing. I might book like 2 writes a day, or maybe it's learning how to get into the production side of things. And I'm trust me, I haven't spent a lot of time doing that. If you heard one of my demos, you'd be like, "Oh Lord, man!" But it's I'm learning new
It's a
things.
process though, right? And like
Yeah,
anything complex, you've got to start somewhere, right?
yeah, and I think that's kind of like what I've been diving into, and it's because like you could to a certain degree, like, I might be on the road and we might need like an overdub on something. And if I don't know how to do any of that, then, it's just not going to help anybody out. So it's learning to be the best in any situation. I think it's really important. So that's kind of him being around has motivated me. Every day you wake up and you see your kid and you're like, all right, like, what am I going to do for him and my family and myself? Because there's a sense of accomplishment when you do these things and accomplish something that's going to help yourself and your family. You're kind of like, this is awesome. It's like working out in the morning. Like you get that pump on, you feel great for the rest of the day. It's the same with like I feel like anything else kind of compares to that in the sense where there's that feeling of accomplishment, and that's really important.
Yeah, it's such a powerful motivating force for all of us. And you mentioned earlier about not sleeping in anymore since you've had Levi come along, but you're a farm kid. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your backstory. I'll bet you didn't sleep in back in those days either.
Strangely enough, like my grandma, on the other hand, when I was living with them, she'd be up early every morning, and my grandpa and I, we would sleep until like 9 o'clock ish or something like that. Um, but I know, like when I was working with my dads in the summer, it was always like just ridiculous. Like we wake up at 4:30, and I don't know if it was maybe so we could have like an hour lunch at Subway or something, but it was kind of like we'd go out and build fence for livestock, like farm fence, and we're up ridiculously early, and that definitely kind of gave me this mentality for work. And like when I say before Levi, like it wasn't that I wasn't determined. I was most certainly determined. I just like you know instead of going out on a Friday night now or something like that, I'll stay in and work. That's what I'd rather do. Um, that's the only difference. But I've always been motivated, and it's definitely thanks to my upbringing with farmers and just that work ethic of getting up in the morning, getting the job done, getting as much as you can done, and it's been had a lot of positives that have translated into being a musician, and there's a lot of negatives because the difference between working on the farm and music is that one's hurry up and wait, and the other is I can get this job done today. So I've had to learn to be patient, which is not one of my greatest traits, but it's coming along.
Well, yeah, I think it takes time to learn patience, right? And it's interesting that you talk about how your early life conditioned you for the work ethic that you need to be successful now. It's not an uncommon story because country music, I think, is to a degree a white collar business now. It used to be more blue collar, but now it's more white collar. But it's still speckled with people like yourself who come from blue collar backgrounds, and they carry those um, positive work ethics forward with them as they succeed in the business. And so it's good to hear you talk about that. Are there aspects of the farm that you miss? Because just being a little self-indulgent here, I grew up on a farm as well. And one thing that I miss about the farm is that when you did an honest day's work, you could always see the result, whether
Yeah,
it was building fence, whether it was, stacking bales, moving cattle from pasture to pasture. Like there was something very tangible and visible about the process of work. Where in the music industry, sometimes you toil away on something for weeks or months and you don't see the result in many cases till years later.
exactly. That's exactly what I had to get used to, because it's like um I was used to putting in that work, but I was also used to seeing the reward right away. I wasn't, whereas a song like, Got Your Name on It, for instance, like we recorded that and it took like, this is right after being signed. And I immediately realized how long everything takes. I think it was like 6 months or something before. And that was pretty quick, like 6 months. I think it took 6 months. We got the song out. And then the video and everything followed that. But like, I remember, um, while I was waiting for all that to happen, I was still working a regular job, and even halfway through my album cycle, I was still working on the farm. Like all those songs, I remember I was actually on tour with the Rec Laws, and I'd be up like 4:30 or 3:30, depending on how far I had to drive in Ontario, do the chores, and there's like I think a couple occasions where I showed up like just covered in cow manure because I didn't have time to shower. But like it's strange. Like I love
People know
seeing.
you're the real deal when you smell like cow shit when you're
Yeah.
in the meet and greet line.
Yeah.
They know you're not just fronting.
Yeah, hopefully, I don't know, it depends on how strong the hand soap was in the venue's bathroom at the time, but hopefully no one got tortured too bad. But yeah, as you're saying though, there's definitely like an instant reward you feel when you're on the farm. It's like, all right, like I fed the cattle today. Like they're done. I see them eating that bale. Like it's we're in music. Like you could write a song, and some like it might not be good enough. It might be good enough. You don't know until like 12 months later, however long, when someone's got that song on hold, or maybe I'm considering to cut it, and then we collectively all agree as a team that you're like, hey, no, like it's a good song, but I just don't think it compares to this other one. And sometimes it's like that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes, because you're like, all right, like I didn't get to see the results of my efforts right away, and on top of that, it wasn't great enough. So it's a learning curve for sure, but you just got to know that there is going to be a result. So that's what I've had to kind of put into my mind. You're like, I'm doing this. I need to expect that I'm not going to see the result of it. So what it's helped me to do is continue working at other things to fill that gap. Where instead of waiting for a result, I'm like, all right, let's get on something else, so that once I get the result for this, there's going to be another a dozen more of them following.
Right. And the more of those seeds you plant, the bigger your crop is going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Going back to the old farm adages. So yeah, it's pretty cool as well to have witnessed you come along at a time when country music was really forging a lane in pop, and pop country was extremely popular. Maybe even arguably at its peak in 2017, 2018. But you really led the neo traditional movement back to sort of the hat act country of the 90s, right? And was there ever a temptation for you to not do that in the name of going out to radio and the industry with something safe? Like, I mean, you and I have had these conversations, so full disclosure, I know the answers, but I think it's important for the audience, especially young artists who might be getting messages from their team that they need to play it safe and, do things a certain way. I mean, there must have been a little bit of that in your realm or in the back of your mind while you were going, this is what I need to be and this is what I feel right about, but I also want to be successful.
Yeah, so there's definitely a fine line between safe or not. I mean, I'll still say we played it relatively safe, but in no point in time has my like music and like my integrity as a human being and who I am and why I matter been questioned. You know, like I have such an incredible team with Shan and all those guys, and I'll bring a song forward or we'll be talking about production of something, and if I say like, "Hey, like this might be like too much or something," then I have an incredible producer, and they kind of see what I want to do, and but they make it so it doesn't sound like it's from like 1950. So it's kind of like finding that happy medium, and then when we found it, and we've definitely pandered to the idea of like this kind of pop country because you're right, it was at a time when that's all pop was king, man. Like you couldn't
Yeah.
get through without something that was relatively like that. So, got your name on it, for instance. We're like, all right, like there's that catchy like hook in it, like dun 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 dun. Dun.
Yeah, it had a
So
bit of a almost like a Wade Hayes feel,
this,
from the 90s, if you remember Wade Hayes.
I don't know if I do. Wait,
He had a bunch of hits. Probably he had a debut single called uh, what was it called? I'm old enough to know better, but I'm still too young to care.
well, I think
But
I
it also had a great hook, right? And then he had other singles like On a Good Night, which had great hooks. But it had that great lyrical content, but still something super catchy and melodically very infectious,
yeah,
right?
like
That's a hard
kind of
combination to find.
what would like any man of mine be without that fiddle coming in like at this you know what I mean? Like there's like that. So we the cool thing is we used a banjo for that hook, so it's still like an element of country music, and we just kind of met in the middle with the two, where I was still singing country music, and we're still doing what was good for radio, and over time we've snuck in more, made it more and more country as time's gone on, um, because we're like, all
Yeah,
right, we got
Hack and Darts,
yeah.
like songs like that. Nobody's putting out music like that other than you right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was so fun because like, our whole team shares the same vision where we're like, all right, like this is where we want to go. Here are the stepping stones we need to lay down to get there. And it's been such an incredible journey kind of going through all these different things like selecting music, and this next project it might take a little bit longer. We're not too sure yet, but we want to make sure that this next thing we do is going to be really true to who I am as an artist and stuff. And not that the last album wasn't, but we're kind of, as you can see, like a lot of those songs aren't like all too similar, not too much of the same. So we're really kind of figuring out what our mix was, and I'm really excited for this next season and just like really diving into what that sounds like. We're gonna have some really great guitar pickers on there and some fiddles and everything like that, and really chase the sound.
Yeah, it's super cool. And you alluded to your team earlier in the conversation, and Shannon McNeven has done just an incredible job managing and
Yeah.
steering your career along with Don Green. How soon did you know that Shannon was going to be your guy? Like when
Oh,
you,
immediately.
yeah, it was right away.
Oh yeah, he's the one that discovered me, and he's the one that kind of like helped me in this whole business. Like he's such a champion for people. Like he really believes in something, and he really is passionate about it too. So it's not just like, hey, uh, I mean, it's similar to you. You're passionate about all your projects as well, and you guys really fall in line in that sense. Where he kind of found um, me, and he has other projects as well, but like he's like, all right, like who are you as a person, as an artist? What makes you tick and move? And he really dives into every aspect of that, combines it with the business, and finds a team to kind of like surround you that is going to make sure you get to the top mark there, and achieve your goals. And I've just been so blessed to have him in my corner since day one. He's really I don't know where I'd be without that guy. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think one of his major strengths is the fact that he's not lost touch with the reality that he started in this business as a fan, passionate about the format, passionate about country music. And sometimes this business will force you to disconnect from that in the name of commerce, in the name of opportunity. But Shannon never did. And I think that that is bearing itself out in the results. There are a lot of people who gravitate to country music, especially in the last, I would say, decade, because the format has become hot. But it's very evident that they're only here now because there's opportunity. They're not here because they love the format.
Yeah, no, Shan's super passionate about everything he does. So it's like he's obviously a big lover of country music, so he knows what the fans gonna want to hear. He knows what that sounds like, but he also knows what his artists want and what they're kind of striving for, and he puts together a plan that really falls in line with all those different categories. They all just all fall in line, and it's like, all right, like what we're doing is incredible, and, and they're doing like every single person in his camp, he's had something to do with how great they're doing and how they're succeeding. And he's really just like pushed us to be better, and really strived to make us feel good about what we're doing. And he's a really caring person. He cares about the business, and he also cares about the individual as well. And that's something that's been really evident. I've had my struggles coming up through this business, and a lot of people wouldn't have the patience for that, but he's been really true, a true friend, and a great business partner in this. So it's been pretty awesome.
It's amazing when you can find someone who sees the potential in you, not only as an artist, but as a human being, right? And they
Yeah,
encourage the best in both of those domains for you. And Shannon has certainly done that. He's going to love this podcast, by the way. It's a
it
nice
makes me
love-in
emotional
for him.
talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
him.
no, it's
I do
all
love the guy.
positive. Now, given where you are in the business, for any new artist who's starting out that's watching this podcast or listening, we talked a lot about Shannon's virtues specifically, but what advice would you give a young artist who's looking to procure a manager? Like, what do you think they should be looking for out of the gate? And I know everybody's a little different, everybody's style is a little different, but what are the foundational pillars to a good manager that you think someone needs to have in order to deliver for their client?
I think the most important thing, as long as an artist, if you're ever asking like who you are and why you matter, if that's ever uh, that becomes trivia for you, and you're kind of questioning that as you're going along with your team, then you have to kind of sit back and reevaluate what you're doing. Yeah, I think it's really important for an artist to stay true to themselves, because at the end of the day, say I'm super passionate about country music. That's like who I am. But if I was singing like Ariana Grande songs or something, I don't think I'd be too passionate about doing that. I'd still be singing, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to be happy doing what I love. So it's like, you can chase the record deals, you can chase all that stuff, but at the end of the day, if you're not doing what you want and what you love, you're not going to be happy anyway. So I think it's really important that you stay true to yourself, because like at the end of the day, happiness is what every human being in the planet wants. And if you chase that and you're true to yourself, then there's always going to be a good result.
Yeah, and I think finding a manager that aligns with the vision of where you want to go with your career and then encourages that and doesn't try to distort it too much for
Yeah,
commercial purposes. I think that's really imperative. And track record, I think, is important to a degree. To a degree, Shannon is relatively new to the management business, but he's not new to the industry.
Yeah.
But he's built a substantial track record early and right out of the gate. And often when I'm connecting with younger artists or artists who are new to the business, it's like, hey, listen, you know, you can grow with people in this business. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you can find someone who's already done some of the things that you want to do and they get you and they align with your vision, then that can be really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of like at that point, Shan had already like dealt with James Barker and all that stuff and the rec laws too. And so I knew what he's capable of, but like um I kind of like agreed to work with him just based on who he was as a person. And then I got to see that business side like kind of over the years, and all these crazy things started happening that I just really never imagined to be possible, like the YouTube thing or any of that other stuff. This kind of like the streaming numbers. Like I have a hard time counting to five. So like this this is always
130
so.
million, you're going to run out of fingers and toes pretty fast.
But I was really blown away, and I'm really blessed to have the team that I have around me, and it's hard. It's hard to say, man. It's like I think that you just got to find people that are passionate about your project. I think that's the most important thing um, for an artist. It's like, all right, like you could go down to Universal Nashville or Sony or anywhere down there, but if they're not passionate about your project, they might say like, this guy's great or this girl's great, and they sign this person because they know the talent there. But if they're not like, I love what they're doing, then that person's gonna get shelved. So you got to find that person that you know really is passionate about what you're doing. It's super important.
Yeah, and you have that in your professional team. You also have it in your personal life. You've
Yeah,
been lucky enough to find someone in Marina, your wife, who supports, aligns with, and encourages the best in you. So tell
yeah.
us a little bit about how she brings out the best in you and what you've noticed in terms of changes in yourself for the positive since you started dating her and then eventually married her.
I mean, the best thing that's ever happened is my wardrobe, I guess. She'll say that like when I met her, it was horrific. So I mean, personally though, like she's just been so patient and so loving with me over these past few years, and it's taught me to be a more patient and loving man because like I feel like we might be similar in the sense. I think we were talking about this a while ago, where it's like something I used to be reactive instead of sitting back and really analyzing a situation. So I saw her do that a lot. Like I'd do something that like I'd do something that I didn't even know was wrong, but like as soon as I thought about it, like oh man, like that must have really ticked her off. And instead of her getting mad, she'd sit back and just kind of like really analyze it and figure out how she's going to react. And it's almost terrifying when a woman's thinking. You're like, oh no, like, but it's taught me to kind of be the same way because like she'll do something and I'll be like, all right, like, and she trust me, she's an angel. She really doesn't do too many things to irritate me. But if she does, or anyone does for that matter, I just kind of sit with it for a bit and kind of say like, all right, like how can I take my relationship with my wife into the real world and apply it? Because we have a great relationship. We don't argue. It might be I might leave like a milk glass on the counter, and that's as intense as it gets in the house. But it's you know over time I've learned developing that relationship really helps me in the outside world.
The foundation of respect. And
Yeah,
if it's mutual, then I think it's easier to find that space where you can respond rather than react, right? And where
yeah,
you can start paying attention to your own emotional triggers. And then the next step is asking yourself why those things are triggers and what may have imprinted on you earlier in your life to make you get so upset when somebody
yeah,
says this word or does this thing, right? And the more you sort of dial into that and do a little self analysis, the easier it is then to find empathy and space for people who maybe are not quite there on their journey yet.
yeah. No, absolutely. That's 100% it.
Yeah, it's been amazing watching your rise and watching you evolve as a man, and, you're a highly competitive guy, which I really respect.
Oh yeah.
You're an alpha, you wanna win, but you've also integrated very effectively into the Canadian country music industry, and I think and I wanna hear your thoughts on this, but I think one of your secret weapons is humility. You're a really humble, down to earth guy, and you don't rub people the wrong way.
Yeah, it's I don't think I have an issue with like anybody I've ever met in this industry. We're all you have to look at it as a family, but there is a competitive edge to me where, I want to be the best at everything I do. I want to succeed. So, I'm not saying I'm the best yet or ever will be, but that's the goal that you have to set for yourself if you want to achieve anything. If you're like, I want to be as good as this guy or that guy, then you know because in reality you set your goals and normally you hit right below the bar. That's just how it works in life. You might say like, all right, I want to bench 330 pounds by the end of this month. Am I going to do that if I'm sitting at like 300? Maybe not, unless I poke myself in the rear end. But it's gonna be you have to be like, all right, like I got to 325 or something like that. Like I don't think I benched that much. I have no idea. I'm just using numbers that you could probably relate to. But you know, if I hit that, you're gonna hit right below it, but that's still super impressive. You just have to keep working harder because say I said 325 was going to be my max, and then I hit 315. There's that difference. There's that however many like 10-pound difference that you just missed out on because you set the bar too low. So setting the
Yeah.
bar higher is always beneficial, but you just got to make sure that your ego doesn't get mixed up in it because
Well, and I think you're making a really good point because you're basically talking about competing with yourself. And when you're
yeah,
setting the bars and you're using fitness as an analogy, it's perfect because you're not going, I want to bench what that guy benches. You're going, I just want to improve my own max by 30 pounds. And if you can take that into the business world, then you're less likely to get caught up in the hyper competitive bullshit cancer of comparison culture that
yeah.
sometimes really eats away at all of us in this business.
It does, and I've definitely been victim to that, I think. But at the end of the day, and COVID's really helped with that, honestly, because there's a lot of self reflection in this time, and it's like, all right, what can I do to be better myself? Like, what as an individual, what do I need to do to be the golden standard? And you know, the more you sit and worry about everybody else, the more that's gonna eat you up, and you know, you're not gonna be at your best. I can promise you there's always gonna be someone better than me out there. That's just the thing. Even with fighting, like Conor McGregor was at the top of the chain for a while there, and sure enough, someone better came along and knocked him off the chair. And
There's no place in the world where that's more evident than the UFC,
yeah,
or combat sports in general, right? Like,
yeah,
I always think back to, Mike Tyson, 1990, 38-0, unstoppable. He started having some tough times and snorting a little too much coke and
yeah,
hanging out with too many girls till too late in the morning, and then he lost to Buster Douglas, and it was like that can happen, man. Like if you
yeah.
lose track, if you get so bought into your own hype and you start to lose track of the things that made you great in the first place, if you lose the eye of the tiger, it can all end quickly,
Oh yeah.
and it's just it's a startling realization in combat sports because it happens so fast, but it also happens in art.
Yeah, I think like as far as being great comes, it's like you almost have to drop the ego. There's got to be a competitive nature, but like if ego gets in the way of where you're going, it's just gonna trip you every single time. If you're going up a set of stairs and there's the ego right there, you're gonna go all the way back down to the bottom and pick yourself back up. And that's something that I learned very early on the farm. Like you just can't really be like that. If you acted tougher than the next guy because you maybe bailed more or were able to mow more bales than that guy, then guess what? your dad, my dad or grandpa would be like, all right, since you're so great, you can do the next load by yourself. Those lessons were instilled in me very young, and I'm glad they were, because you know I can really look at this um, career as kind of like, all right, like I know what to do to be better, and that's not looking at anyone else, because at the end of the day, everyone else is different from everyone else. I mean, I'm my own person. I gotta make music different than the next guy. So, I'm not trying to be better than anyone. I just need to be the best that I can be. And whatever I achieve from that, that's amazing. If I fall flat, I fall flat, pick myself back up again, keep going. But, you know, that's not anyone's fault. At the end of the day, you release good music, you release good music. If you're a good person, you're a good person. And I'm just trying to, do both of those things, be the best person I
Well,
can
and I
be.
would say, given your trajectory and your headspace, there's no way you're going to fall flat. You're going to make it. Uh, the interesting thing is, and again, this might dial back to some advice that you can give people, is how do you think it is that artists come off the rails? Like we talked about combat sports, people kind of lose their edge at some point. They don't train as hard. You know, as an artist, what do you think that people do wrong, that they're on this great path and then suddenly they veer off and they're on their way down? Do you think it's self-indulgence? Do you think it's substance abuse? Do you think it's a combination of getting bored or entitled? Like, what do you think it is that brings artists down generally from what you've witnessed so far?
Personally, I would say I had a huge issue with alcohol. Like it was absolutely destroying my life. So like and it was kind of born out of boredom and everything else like that. And especially COVID, I was doing great with it. Like, I just didn't drink at all really. But COVID hit, I felt sorry for myself. And that was the beginning of the end. So as soon as you're like, poor me, then you quite literally pour yourself one. So it's like I'm sure that hook's been
In the words of Morgan Wallen.
yeah, and everyone else. I think but who else did that? Was it
Yeah.
Tracy Lawrence? No, someone like that. It's been used before a lot. But that's what happens,
Hmm.
man. And it's like it's so funny. Such a fine line, because if I'm out doing what I love, that's not really an issue. But as soon as I'm saying like poor me, I'm only doing this, or I'm so sad for myself because I'm only getting to I have to stay home, and it's like um, obviously I've shopped the bottle and I've been sober, but like I had to slap myself in the face. It's like, just because you're not getting to be like a superstar and get out there on the road again, like there's people that are in the hospitals, nurses, everyone else that, you know, they're not saying poor me, they're busting their asses right now. And, there's just I had to kind of say like, all right, what am I doing? Like I had to kind of step outside and look in and say, all right, I'm like going to ruin my life over this, where there's a whole season where I can be getting better. And I had to kind of like look back. I'm like, all right, so if I had to continue to drink and continue to go down this downward spiral, then what's going to happen is, first of all, my marriage is going to fall apart. My son, might not get to see him. That like the music and everything, that's irrelevant. But like compared to them, obviously. But um, eventually you come to the point where you're like, all right, like what am I doing wrong here? What's making me feel like this? And you analyze it, and yeah, it's a tough time. But I think that the main thing that drives people into that mood is there's just like such a weird kind of like lack of support with other artists in Canadian country music. And it's like I have a lot of great friends, but it's like wasn't until COVID that I started actually reaching out to people, and becoming friends with them. And it's like, these guys are awesome. Like, why didn't I do that before? And it's because everyone's doing their own thing. They really are. Everyone's like on their own tours and everything like that. And there's like certain groups, but I think it's really important that that this Canadian country community really connects, and that's really been such an uplifting thing for me to feel, is connecting with these other artists and writing with them, and just getting to know them. It's been such a blessing.
And realizing that a lot of them are struggling with exactly the same
Yeah.
things you are. They're also trying to figure out what to do with this excess time on their hands and how they can be productive in that space. And you touched on something very early on in this portion of the conversation, and I love thinking about it this way. It's the same set of circumstances that you deal with whether you choose to identify as a victim or a survivor,
Yeah.
right? You can be a vindicated survivor or you can be a self professed victim. Same set of circumstances in both cases, right?
Oh yeah.
It's just your perspective and how you choose to process it to move yourself forward.
And I'm very like I like looking at both sides of the coin, right? And initially, because I like to work, 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 and when I don't have that, then all of a sudden I'm kind of like, what am I doing? So there's like this self pity that kind of came over me, and it almost I almost forgot about my duties as a father, and I'd still like I'd drank or whatever at night. I still wake up, cook breakfast, and live a normal life, but it was killing my body, my mental health. I was just spiraling downward faster and faster, and I had to kind of sit with myself and be like, all right, what are we doing here? It's
You were
like,
trying to cover up pain.
yeah, exactly. And it's like this whole thing, it sucks. But I had to realize that like everyone else is going through it too. Um, and I'm at home. I have 8 hours a day or more, as long as Levi's up. I have a guitar here. I could be doing something productive with my day, um, to kind of move myself forward. Because like honestly, I just recorded for the first time in a year, and I fell flat. I got like a song out of the deal. We were aiming to do four, but I just wasn't prepared. I haven't recorded in a year or so, so I was way behind on that, and it's kind of like it's one of those things where like in that kind of decision thing where there's two options. I was like, I could feel sad that I didn't accomplish this because I trust me, I worked really hard before I started the recording process, but I could also be like, all right, here's what I know I screwed up on, and what I missed, and here's what I'm gonna fix. We have we got a song out of it. That's good. Um, I just need to be better and figure that out. And in this time, that's a pure example. Instead of like working on my craft, I mean, I have been, but like focusing on that and as a specific thing I work on, like recording. Um, I was doing other things. I was feeling sorry for myself or busy doing this or that. And what happened is I got a year behind, quite
Yeah.
literally. I kind of I stayed at that same, I wouldn't say a year behind, but I stayed at the same level that I was at already. And I've already started diving back into my practicing, and I'm immediately better than where I was. It
But
was
look at it this way, you could have also wasted another year and another
yeah,
year, right? And you
exactly.
chose to turn around at some point, take charge again, be a great role model for your son, be a good husband, and a better man for yourself too. Now, we started off this conversation talking about all of the amazing things you've done personally and professionally. How much does gratitude for what you've already achieved factor into keeping you grounded and on the rails?
It's every moment, every time you accomplish something, even if it's minuscule, it adds up. It's kind of like a support, like on the back of a chair. You're sitting upright, you're feeling good. Um, and I think it's important to have those little things and celebrate every little win, because, like I said, and when you fall short of something, you can look back and be like, you know what, we did this. We can do this again. How do we do it though? And you just really have to analyze your game plan and figure out what that means to kind of keep accomplishing those little goals, and the big ones too. They come along every once in a while and they feel amazing. So I think it's like having stuff like that happen is great and all, but at the end of the day, I'm doing what I love, and it's kind of like I might not get awarded for it or any type of gratitude towards what I'm doing from other people, but I'm just thankful that I get to be playing music, and I have such a great team, and I have people that support me. In general, that's always going to be something I'm thankful for and make me love what I'm doing even more.
And I think the community has received you very well. I mean, big CCMA win, a Juno nomination. Radio loves you. The industry
I
loves you. The
love it.
buyers all love you. Like it's actually been, you've been really welcome for a guy who kind of came back with something that hadn't been done in a while musically.
I'm like, I'm really blessed to be in this industry because like every single person I've met in this community is incredible. Like there's not a bad apple. You might know of some, but I don't. But I've just been really blessed to like to meet these people and just get to know them better. And it's kind of weird going into the because you hear all these guys on the radio if you're driving through town, and then you might go into a radio station and be like, they're like excited to meet you is what you think, but they probably don't know I'm more excited to meet them than they meet me. I'm like, man, I listen to you every time I drive through like Belleville, or I drive through like my hometown. Like those guys are hometown heroes, right? So it's exciting to meet all them, and then obviously in the industry, just meeting everyone else because there's so much that goes on behind the scenes to make this tick. This whole thing, like music getting on the radio, CCMAs, all these different award shows, and there's so many industry people that nobody knows about. They just hear the song on the radio, and then that's it. They don't know all the mechanics behind that song being on the radio, and that this industry being celebrated the way it is. So it's a really amazing industry, and I just need a moment for to thank those people. And we need CCMAs for them.
How focused are you on expanding what you've done into the United States and internationally? I mean, obviously we work together, so I'm privy to this, but the audience might not be.
I'm very focused. We're planning to move there in September and expand it just because I'm kind of like I did this thing where when I was young, I quit my job as a plumber and as in plumbing and sheet metal, and I said, you know what, I got to halfway through. I was like, I'm going home. I got to do music because I don't want to be sitting in 30 years saying I could have done this, but I didn't, or maybe I could have. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm like, I want to see how far I can take it, and I don't want to regret being like however old and just kind of looking back and saying, dang it, like I might have been able to do it. I don't know for sure. So, and I think that like being down there too is just really a lot of the Canadians have moved there. Like Brett has a place down there. Like all everyone else is like, yeah, we're jumping ship to America. I'm like, all right. It doesn't mean that I won't be back because I love this country way too much not to be living in both places. But I'm really excited to try it out. I think that like some of what they're doing down there kind of mixes in what I'm doing up here too. And if I can tour the world, I got to try and do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like you get more street cred in Canada if you get more fame and adulation in the US. Like we're
Yeah,
we're a very proud country and we do try to respect and appreciate our own artists and actors and everybody we produce out of this country disproportionately, by the way, in the arts. But it's almost like we don't appreciate them to the same degree unless they prove themselves in other countries, most notably the US. It's an interesting dynamic.
yeah, it's definitely strange for sure. I mean, I've seen it a little bit with like some other artists for sure, and I've been really blessed with my success, but I do see that. I think that like if you go into the States, it's kind of like this. It's almost like this badass thing where it's like, all right, this guy just accomplished this, or this girl did. Um, Tennille, for instance, like that's huge. I mean, like the competition down there is, I think it's twice as thick, to be honest.
Tennille Art's getting a number one
Yeah,
single, but Tennille
yeah.
Towns has also been crushing it
The
down
Tennille,
there.
yeah, the Tennilles.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
two of them. It's
the
like
two Tennilles.
it's like they're probably getting confused at this point. Like, why is Canada sending us like two Tennilles? Like, what's the next
I'm
year?
sure that's happening. I'm sure those conversations are happening at American radio. It's
They're
just so cool to see, and it's nice. it's exciting, and it's positive for our industry in Canada when we see someone like Tennille Towns, of course, having top tens in the US, and Tennille Arts recently charting a number one. It's like all ships rise with the tide. That's
Yeah.
good for all of us because US labels are going to see that now, and more of them are going to be willing to take a shot on a Canadian.
Exactly. I think it's like, and the coolest thing is that it's two women that went down there and did this. It's like it's not some dude like the King of Canada or anything like that. Like I don't know if we have. If I had to pick, I'd say George or the George Strait would be Brett right now of Canada, but I can't think of anyone else. Don't tell him I said that.
He'll love
He'll
that.
go
He'll love
straight
that
to his head. No, I'm
comparison. Yeah, totally.
joking.
But no, I know what you're saying. I
Wait,
mean, this industry is infamous for being, for having the odds stacked against females, and the
yeah,
fact that we have two massive female success stories coming out of Canadian country music that have now broken into the U.S. market. But you know what the interesting thing is Canada has always had females get well received in the U.S. marketplace. Whether it was Michelle Wright having a number one with
yeah,
"Take It Like a Man," Shania Twain, obviously Carolyn Dawn Johnson, who I work with, like they do seem to be more receptive to our female artists and signing and working with them than our male artists, at least by virtue of what we've seen over the last 20 years or so.
yeah. It's definitely interesting. I mean, like I think the last male Canadians I remember really being huge in the States were like Hank Snow and Wilf Carter. I mean that's going way back. So it's kind of
Hmm. Paul
be
Brandt had "My Heart Has a History," right? Went
that's
number
right.
one in the U.S. in the '90s, but they didn't really follow that up down there. I mean, he still, of course, continues to crush it in Canada, but yeah, it's interesting the difference between male Canadian artists and their track record in Nashville and females, and we haven't quite figured that one out yet.
Yeah, it's definitely a strange narrative, but that's I'm still gonna see. I gotta see if it works. If it's it's kind of cool because Brett seems like he's catching on down there, uh, crazy. It's the CM, what is it? The CMT television and all that stuff's picking him up. So, I look at that as a Canadian male artist. And I'm like, this is great. Like this is great news, for everybody. It's I know if we work hard, and Brett's a really great example of that, then things are possible. And I think that like if you go down there and work as hard as the next guy, then things like that can happen. And but you also have to be prepared for if they don't. And I'm definitely prepared for that to happen. And I'm happy working at Canada too. Don't get me wrong. I like challenges, so I'm gonna go for the challenge.
Man, when you climb, K2, you got to go for Kilimanjaro, right? And then you got to go
Yeah,
for Everest. Like, you want to keep climbing mountains. I think that's really important. Um, yeah, I mean, the strategy that we have taken with Brett, which I can speak to, is not dissimilar to the strategy that Shannon has executed so effectively with you in the US, which is let's build the story with streams, with ads at CMT,
yeah,
and then see what label partners might be interested in pouring some gas on the fire, right? And
yeah,
I really admire Shannon. I know he's turned down several deals for you in the US because he just didn't feel like those partners had enough muscle to do what they needed to
yeah.
do for you to launch you. And I think as a manager, it takes a lot of guts and gumption to do that and say, I know it's a US deal, but we're not going to take it. We're going to wait for the right situation that we know is going to be a success and a long term partnership. So I really admire him for taking that tact. And obviously, it's
It's
the
the
same one that we're
same.
pushing for with Brett.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing where like, in any situation, any artist, it's like if you can get so far with like any label or whatever, but if they don't aren't passionate about you and they're kind of like, all right, well, we have the money, but we're not really gonna do anything with this, then at the end of the day, I gotta owe them like however many thousands of dollars and kind of be in the same position I was when I started. So it's like it's a difficult decision for you guys because we don't have to say it because it's there's a lot of credit, um, that you guys deserve that you don't get for just, making these decisions because
Holding out for the right
yeah,
situation because you have a standard for what you know it's gonna take,
yeah, I
right?
wouldn't. I'm so bad at that stuff too because like I'm bad at saying no to anything. Like if someone's like, "Hey, like you want to do this interview or do like this fundraiser or something right like that," I'm like, "Yeah, like sure, like absolutely." And then eventually, like I have myself triple booked on one day or something at the same time. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" So it's like any situation where you have the like just the power and the prowess to kind of be like, all right, like no, man, we're just gonna sit this one out and kind of look for something else. It's definitely kind of like there's respect there that 'cause it takes a lot of balls to say no sometimes. It really does.
Yeah, and also, full credit to Shannon, but you've gotta know you've gotta know that you can do that without your artist losing their shit.
Oh yeah,
Right? Like you have to work both sides of a situation like that where it's like, hey, this is the reason why we need to pass on this and educate and edify the artist in that process so they don't feel like they're losing an opportunity because so many of you work so hard for so long to get on someone's radar. And when you finally do, it's so tempting to just grab for that brass ring and go for it,
oh
right?
yeah,
But if you have someone who can preach a little restraint and go, no, 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 we have this already, but if we hold out, we're going to get something even better. And I don't think any manager really knows when it's the right or the wrong call. But if you truly believe in the project and you believe in the potential and you want to see a situation where your artist is playing in front of 10,000 people in Oklahoma, then it's like, we know we got a better chance at getting there with Universal, Sony, Warner,
yeah,
Broken Bow than we do with, a fledgling company that has no power and no radio team, right?
yeah,
Like, what's the end goal, and then how do we build backwards in setting up the right team to achieve that goal?
yeah.
So yeah,
It's definitely
there's an
difficult.
art.
I could see that like as an artist too because like there were certain things like that where I didn't know. I was just like you think that being in the US in any circumstance is like, yeah, I'll do it. But you don't realize that there's like, that's not gonna just signing any random deal isn't gonna, break the bread for you. It's like
No, all it
so
is a press release.
oh yeah, it's basically is what it is. So it's like that's what I've had to learn to trust the process for sure because I'm like I said I used to be very reactive to things like that and yeah, as an artist, you guys definitely take the heat sometimes. You probably, I, and we're always in the wrong. Like I'd say, like 99.5% of the time, we're in the wrong, um, and we're kind of saying like, hey, like what the hell is your problem? Like you should have done this or that, and it's like just wait this out and see what I'm talking about, and then obviously that silver lining shown at the end, you're like, oh, okay, like I do see what you're talking about. But it takes a minute to kind
Well,
of
I think that's why you need management around you so that you
yeah,
can have a bit more of an objective perspective on what's going on, right? Like most artists are very emotionally driven because they spend their day translating chaos of emotion into something that's tangible and mentally digestible for the rest of us. That's what artists do, right?
yeah,
They take extreme emotion and they turn it into something that everybody can wrap their head around. So they're emotional beings, and they're hypersensitive to emotion, and that's not a bad thing. That's not a pejorative thing. It's just you do require some people around you to
oh, yeah.
disconnect you from that sometimes and go, hey, we gotta put the feeling brain aside for a minute. We gotta engage the thinking brain, and it
I
takes a
mean,
while to build that rapport too.
if I were to do what I wanted to every time, I'd probably be the opening act on Cirque du Soleil or whatever you call it. Like it wouldn't be. I'd be wearing those parachute pants and everything else too. Like that's
I was
just
hoping for tights.
yeah. that, the kind of decisions that looking back at some of the ideas I had or other people had, and I was like, yeah, like this is great. And then, you know, they're kind of like at the time, they're Shannon or whoever I was working with was very kind about it. They're just like, no, it's not great. And then, like, looking back at like, some of the things I was interested in doing, I was just like, "What on earth was going through my mind?" Like, even now, I'm kinda like, "This guy, like, how do they not flip their lid on me?" Like, so I can definitely see, like, the patience it would take to be in your position and just kinda be like, "Alright, like, how do we deal with this situation, defuse it, and then, in a couple years or months, like, they're gonna be look back and be like, oh, okay, like, I get it."
Well, I have to give you some props because you were obviously raised very well and you're very humble, and that's a huge component to being able to deploy patience. Um, a lot of times, and again, I understand artists believe they're at a level far beyond than where they actually are in the marketplace because generally they're surrounded by a bunch of people, whether it's family, friends, who are telling them how amazing they are and that they're better than Luke Bryan or Taylor Swift, depending on if it's a guy or a girl, right? And so they get a distorted viewpoint of where they are versus where they think they should be, and that can be really difficult to manage because I always feel like I got into this business to encourage people, and I don't enjoy having to almost discourage people by going like, "Hey, listen, this is, you think you should be here, and I understand, but this is where you actually are given this data, right? And this level of awareness in the industry. And when I call buyers, they go, who? Like it's not where you think it is, and trying to arm them with that understanding and knowledge can be a real difficult process,
Oh, yeah.
for a manager or an agent. It's taken me years to refine that and, not crush somebody's spirit because that's not what I want to encourage people. But I also have to be honest. And sometimes I'm getting frontline feedback that just doesn't align with where the artist believes they exist in the market.
And I've definitely been in that situation myself. So, I've gotten to this place only from experience, right? Like, sometimes you kind of just naturally are humble, and sometimes you're humbled. And I think there's a lot of situations where, you know, I thought I could do this or do that, and I'd play a live show and then listen back to it and just kind of. Actually, the other day, literally last night, I messaged Shannon because I saw a video on YouTube and it's of a live performance, and it was maybe done 2 years ago. And when it first came out, I thought it was great. I was like, "Wow, this is really great." And it was decent, I guess. But like looking back, like I saw it on YouTube. I was watching YouTube with Levi, and he's like, "Oh," it popped up, and he's like, "Da." So I put it on. I was listening back to it, and I was like, "What in like God's green earth is this?" It was horrendous. And so I messaged Shannon, and I was like, "Man, we need to delete this. Like my vocal is terrible." But like back then, I thought I was king shit. I'd go around and just like if you were to take that as a video, if Shan had to take that video into someone in the States and be like, "This is our artist," that label's gonna laugh me out of town. They're gonna be like, "All right, well, we have this guy." In this situation right now, like where I'm at right now, I would, vocally I'm better. Um, and still, there's gonna be mountains to climb, man. Like I can't say that I'm at the top right now. It's a learning process, and luckily, growing up, my dad and my mom and everyone has been really honest with me. They've never been like, "You're the best I've ever heard." There's definitely a few in my family that are like that, but we're very honest people, and so like, my dad might go to one show and be like, "That was awesome. That was the best show I ever saw you do." But if it's a bad show, he's gonna be like, "You like, what were you smoking before you went up on stage? Like, what, something like that." He'll make a comment, but it's never, he never beats you down. It's not like that. It's kind of just like, "Hey, like I've heard you do better before, like, and it's
Yeah, he's not
created."
trying to hurt you. He just knows
Yeah,
what you're capable of,
yeah,
right?
exactly. And I think that some people just need to hear that. And I was very defensive. Like when other people other than my family told me that, I'd bring out the knives and razors. I'd be like, "All right, let's friggin' do this." And it's like, "No, no, no. Like we're trying to help you get better." And it's like, "All right." And it took me a a long time. Like I have a life coach and I have other people I talk to that have helped me get into this mindset where it's like, all right, you know, this person is telling me this. It's like, but I know this individual not to be like that. Like they're not trying to hurt my feelings or anything. They're trying to help me. So it's up to you if you take that what what anyone calls criticism, or I'd say constructive criticism. It's up to you to take that back and work on. And that's what I've done over the past couple of years, and it's helped me become better. And I can only get better, like just based on what I'm told. So this last recording trip, like I was told, is like, hey, look, we know how good you are. This isn't it. Like, let's take a break. Let's work on it. Let's come back to it in a couple months, and we'll do that. And like, I had two options. I could feel sorry for myself and say, no, I'm the best, and let's keep doing this. This is the best I'm ever going to be. Because sometimes you work really hard at the wrong thing, and it's just like, oh, like, oh, this was a waste of work. It wasn't a waste of work. It's you're just doing the wrong thing, and that's what I ended up doing. I was doing all these live streams singing really traditional country, like I'm talking like the 40s, and no one talks like that with their tongue moving around their mouth all the time. So that's like, just how I was like saying words in the mic. I even listened back to it and I was like, this is awful. So it's just, you got to take all that stuff as just people wanting you to be better, and then act on it.
Yeah, it's important to be coachable, right?
Yeah,
If you want to get better, you got to be coachable, and it's why I'm such a big proponent of people getting into competitive situations early in life, whether it's sports, whether it's music lessons, like whatever it is that's forcing you to improve, and having a mentor in that space who intentionally wants the best for you, but sometimes has to yell at you to get that out of you, right?
yeah. Well,
Like there's some real utility to that.
here's a perfect example. You could have a punching bag, and a couple UFC gloves and whatever you need. Say you could have anything that you have in a UFC fighter gym in your house, but what's that gonna do without a coach? You know, like if like I wanted to fight this guy and I was in a training camp and I was just punching the bag every day, or whatever. Like, yeah, sure, I'd get in great shape, but when I got in the ring, that guy could have worked out half as hard as me, and he's got to knock me out. And the reason why is because that guy was coachable, and he listened to the advice that someone gave him. Said, "All right, you're hitting the bag, but why don't you, throw a little, like, you twist your foot, like get a pop in your foot to drive more power into that rib cage when you hit this guy." And like it's little things like that, little critiquing is going to just take you that extra level. And I think that, like, that's another thing, going back on to what advice I'd give to another artist, is just like you said, be coachable. I think that's really, really important because that's something I learned. I'm a stubborn human being. I wouldn't say that I'm cocky, but I'm definitely stubborn. Um,
And I think artists naturally want to resist someone coming in and changing them. But I also will say to artists that you can, if you're honest with yourself, you can generally feel someone's intent. You can
yeah,
you can feel where they're coming from. Either this person is trying to dominate me and put their stamp on me, or they just want the best for me and they're trying to encourage that out of me. And then the quicker you start to discern that difference, the more likely you are to root the people out who just want to change you for the sake of their own ego, versus the people who go, no, 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 like I see so much potential in you. If we can just change this thing 5%, you can be this much better, right? Like as soon as you get to that place and you can discern between the two of those types of individuals, then you are going to thrive.
exactly. And it's like if I were to send you or Shannon a song, and you guys were to like say something like, "Hey, like this sounds not as good as it could be." Like, I know you guys. I know that you're not trying to bully me or anything like that. Like it's just like, all right, like, these guys care about me, obviously. So if they're telling me that this isn't good, then I need to do something about it. And I think that's like one of those things. Like no one that you're working with, in management especially, um, wants you on there if they don't like you. Like they obviously have you on their roster because they like you. So it's just kind of like it's one of those things. And so Yeah, going back on what I said for the advice thing, I'd say, always stay true to your integrity, but also be open to adjusting and becoming better at your lane, staying in your lane, as far as who you are and why you matter, but also, like really enforcing the work ethic behind that. And the work ethic isn't always what you think it is. It's like, maybe vocal lessons or maybe guitar lessons or all that stuff. And I dive into that. I take vocal lessons, guitar lessons, whatever I need to do to be better.
Yeah, refining your craft all the time. So let's talk a little bit about the new single or the latest single, All Night to Figure It Out.
Yeah.
That was pitched to you by Brad Rempel of High Valley, correct?
It sure was. Is Ben Stennis, Brad Rempel, and Jeremy Spillman on that one.
And it's a really anthemic track. As soon as I listened to it, I conjured up thoughts of. Do you remember that George Strait movie, Pure Country?
Oh hell yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like he's got a song where he opens up, and I think the movie actually opens up with
When
him
you
singing a
hear
song
twin
called
fiddles
Heartland.
and steel
Yeah,
guitar.
Heartland.
Oh hell yeah.
Totally. Anyway, when I heard that song, the first thing I said back to Mike and Shannon was, "This is the new show opener. Like this is Jade's Heartland,
Oh
right?
my god,
Like
dude.
in reference to that
I have a
movie."
story to tell you after this.
Nice.
But
You
it's
can tell it right now if you
oh,
want.
okay, yeah, no. So basically we're we're talking about building out the live show again. And I was like last year actually we were talking about this, and I think we were talking going on tour with Chad or something like that. And I was like, whatever it is, like whatever we do, we need to open with this song. And that was the song I sent them. I was like, and they're just like, like we don't really have a budget for like two fiddle players and a steel guitar player or anything for this one, but like, maybe later on. So it's funny that you say that as an opener because that is the most badass opener there is. Like there's nothing but it's just a powerful instrumental, and then boom,
Yeah.
here comes George Strait, tail or no ponytail, it's still badass.
Yeah, oh my god, that movie is it's timeless, for what it was, right? Like I thought he did such a great job with it, but back to you and your music. As soon as I heard that song, I'm like, that's the image that came into my mind, and I'm like that could be a killer show opener for Jade because you have a lot of songs that are very familiar and they're big songs, but this has a uniquely anthemic feel to it.
And he can really harp on the instrument. Yeah, I can definitely wrap my head around that, but like just have like that strong instrumental in the start. It's all in the key
Yeah.
of I think it's in D. Here, one second. I think it's an A. All right. But yeah, you just harp on the A chord for like forever, and that's a country guitar player's like dream. Anything in A or in D is just like you could just noodle around all over the map. So it's that'd be fun for the guys.
Absolutely. And do you feel like you will expand more into that space, or will it be like a not unlike George Strait with Heartland, where he put that out as a single at some point in his own career, and sporadically he had other songs that rocked a little bit more than most of the other material, but they were few and far between.
Yeah.
So in terms of how this will play into your overall musical catalog, where do you think it'll fit? Do you think it'll be the new direction, or will it just be part of an overall story?
I think it's gonna be part of a overall story similar to like that George Strait vibe, because like what we're gonna do in it is gonna be rocking, but we gotta turn the gain down on the guitars a bit maybe, and just make it like really punchy, like kind of like trying to find a good like Too Much Fun by Daryl Singletary, something like that, where it's just like hits you in the face, but it's not like you don't
It's
need
country.
yeah, you don't need to have like earplugs for the concerts you're going to. So,
Well, it's a killer track, man. You are on an amazing trajectory, and I'm so happy for you as an individual,
oh,
as a
I appreciate
man,
that.
as a husband, as a father, and thrilled to work with you, man. This has been fun. I'm a little heartbroken that you kind of came over as soon as COVID hit, but nevertheless, it's
I
been
know.
it's been such a joy to get to know you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, dude. And I'm excited for all these things to actually unwind and to actually be able to get to go to shows together and get these things happening. I'm really thrilled and excited for that to become a thing, man.
Well, I will have a soda water with you backstage.
Sounds good, man.
Okay. Thanks for doing this, brother. Appreciate it.